Well, good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, and welcome to Penn Vicarage. Good to see you this morning. I hope you had a lovely Wednesday. Thank you for joining us for our Bible reflection for today, continuing our way through the book of Hosea. Today we reach chapter 8, and as is always the case with prophets, fasten your seatbelts, hard hats and flat jackets on. Here we go. Hosea chapter 8. Here we go. Put my glasses on. Set the trumpet to your lips. One like a vulture is over the house of the Lord, because they've broken my covenant and transgressed my law. Israel cries to me, my God, we, Israel, know you. Israel has spurned the good, the enemy shall pursue him. They made kings, but not through me. They set up princes, but without my knowledge. With their silver and gold they made idols for their own destruction. Your calf is rejected, O Samaria. My anger burns against them. How long will they be incapable of innocence? For it is from Israel. For it is from Israel an artisan made it. It's not God. The calf of Samaria shall be broken to pieces. For they sow the wind, and they shall reap the whirlwind. The standing grain has no heads. It shall yield no meal. If it were to yield, foreigners would devour it. Israel is swallowed up. Now they are among the nations as a useless vessel. For they have gone wild up to Assyria, a wild ass wandering alone. Ephraim has bargained for lovers. Though they bargain with nations, I will now gather them up. They shall soon writhe under the burden of kings and princes. When Ephraim multiplied altars to expiate sin, they became to him altars for sinning. Though I write for him the multitude of my instructions, they are as a strange thing. Though they offer choice sacrifices, though they eat flesh, the Lord does not accept them. Now he will remember their iniquity and punish their sins. They shall return to Egypt. Israel has forgotten his maker and built palaces, and Judah has multiplied fortified cities. But I will send a fire upon his cities, and it shall devour his strongholds. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. As I said, some of these prophets are an interesting read from time to time, and it's not an easy chapter. But what's this really about? Because I think there's something very, very important for us and for our society, I think really, really vital here. I was always told I remember when I was a confirmation candidate, when I was at boarding school, but sent home to go and visit the vicar, the local vicar, and ask about various things about bishops, priests and deacons, and and so on and so on. And one thing I was asked to talk about were the 7 deadly sins. And top of that list is pride. So along with some other more nasty, what I'd paid seem to be nastier things, you get pride. And people often say, well, pride's not bad, is it? That there's a good pride. And the answer to that is, yes, there is. There is 2 kinds of pride, really. There's what you might call a good pride, and there's a bad pride. Good pride, obviously, it is right to be proud of your children. It's right to be proud of your achievements. It's right to be proud of good things, when someone does well or well. And it's right, and there are times, of course, right to be proud of your church, actually. And it's right to be proud of, I am profoundly proud of St. Bart's and St. Anne's in Penn. I think they're fantastic churches and just the best churches in the world. And I make no apologies for that. I'm proud of them. It's brilliant. That is what you might call a good pride. The pride which is in the 7 deadly sins, which is absolutely deadly, and it really is a deadly sin, probably the deadliest of all actually, is the bad pride, which basically says, I am all right, Jack, and I don't need God. And that is lethal. I have to say, I think it's endemic in our society, in lots of ways, in our lives and so on, that we basically live life as if I'm in charge and I don't need God. And that's really essentially what's gone wrong with the people here. Okay. Essentially, they think they know better. They think they're fine. They think they don't need God. And it goes like a thread all the way through this chapter. And so you see it all the way through. So what is worse, they also think that because they are God's people, because they are children of Abraham and so on like that, they think they don't need to bother. They think they've got a kind of divine right. And it reminds me actually of Jesus with the Pharisees in John chapter 8 and John chapter 9, when he basically says, you think because you're children of Abraham that everything's all right, you haven't got to bother, And Jesus says, well, God can turn these stones into sons of Abraham, as simple as that. But they think, so it says here in verse 2, Israel cries to me, my God, Israel, we know you. And yet Israel has spurned the good, the enemy shall pursue him. So they turn their back on God. They ignore God consistently. but they think they've got God in their pocket because of their ancestry. And a lot of people today do that. They kind of live on what you might call borrowed righteousness. They think they are, because they are who they are and so on, they've somehow got a divine right to get everything they want. And I think there's a massive lesson in here that it's not enough just to be God's people. We've actually got to do God's people as well. We have got to really be God's people. So to demonstrate the fact that they've turned despite the fact they're God's people, and as I say, more dangerously than ever, they think they've got a divine right to blessing anyway. Verse 4, he says, they've made kings, but not through me. So they set up their own system, if you like. They set up their own kings, but they've kind of ignored God in the process. They've set up princes. In other words, they've set up a kind of succession plan, again, ignoring God too. They've made up their own religion by silver and gold. They kind of make idols. And the calf thing in verse 5 is partly, of course, the golden calf which Aaron had when God was giving Moses the Ten Commandments. Aaron made a golden calf, but also after Solomon had a bad son called Rehoboam, and there was also a man called Jeroboam, and the kingdom split, and Jeroboam made two calves which people were to worship. That's what he's talking about here. So he says, so you've made your own kings without me. You've made your own system without me. You've made your own set of religion without me. And he goes on to tell later how Ephraim, Israel, in fact, loves sacrifices, but they want nothing to do with God. They love the form of religion. And he goes on in verse 11 and 13 to say, even though I give them lots and lots, even though I give them lots of laws, they kind of think, it says here, though I write for him the multitude of my instructions, they are regarded as a strange thing. So though they offer choice sacrifices, though they eat flesh, the Lord does not accept them. So they love the form of religion. They like, because it probably makes them feel good, but in reality, their hearts and their minds are a long, long way away from God. So that is a description of pride in its full-blown nature. And I have to say, I'm concerned that that's kind of where we're going as a society, actually, that sometimes people actually quite like religion. They think they've got the divine right to God. God's at their beck and call, do what he wants type of thing. And yet, as they've done here, they've made kings, but not through me. They've made systems, but not through me. They've made religion, but not through me. They think they've got the divine right to God at their beck and call to do what they want to, that he should do what they want him to when they want it, and so on. So they've got the form of religion. They love doing that sort of thing. They love the ceremony, but they don't do anything about it when it comes to it. And as a result of all this, because they've turned their back on God, uses this world phrase, though they sow the wind, they will reap the whirlwind, he says in verse 7. It's a phrase which has found its way into the English language quite commonly. He says, because they've turned their back on me, it's not just morally neutral. They've sown the wind, they're going to reap the whirlwind. So he talks about the standing grain has no heads, and even if it was to yield something, foreigners would devour it. So what they're doing will become useless and pointless. They'll end up working hard for very little results. So these things they'll do. And also, although they've made alliances, it's like a wild ass wandering alone to make alliances again without looking to God. Actually, foreigners think of them a useless vessel, like an unwanted crock, as we might say in the Black Country, because they go around trying to look terribly impressive, thinking they're terribly good, making alliances with all sorts of people, but in reality they've turned their back on God, and other nations around them disdain of them. So, what's this chapter really all about? It's really all about the dangers of the bad kind of pride. A pride that says we don't need God. And I think it says a lesson that we desperately, desperately need to have today. They turn their back on God by setting up their own kings. They turn their back on God by setting up their own political system without referring to God. They've made their own religion without talking to God. They had made all sorts of alliances with various people, again, without consulting God. They loved the form of religion, but they didn't do anything about it, didn't change their hearts. So they set a religion without consulting God as well. And so that's why that is the definition of really, really bad pride. And in a sense, it's summed up by verse 14, which says, Israel has forgotten his maker, and built palaces. And Judah has multiplied fortified cities, but I will send a fire upon her cities, it will destroy his stronghold. The problem is, Israel has forgotten his maker and built palaces. And I think actually there's a lesson for us all today to make sure that we are not forgetting God, that serving God, we are put in Jesus' words, that we are seeking first God's kingdom, that we are asking him before we make big decisions, that we are doing things his way, that we're doing religion his way, that we're putting him first, that we're listening to his words and his instructions. So we don't look like wild asses or look like useless pots, but instead we turn to God and we are truly God's people. So this is what bad pride looks like. It's a lesson for us to hear to avoid it. But in the words of Jesus, what we should be doing instead, we should seek first the kingdom of God, and all the good things will be added to us too. Friends, I hope that makes sense. God bless you. Have a lovely day. More from Hosea tomorrow. And thanks for watching. Do share the message with your friends. Hope you find the message helpful.